In the third year of liking Willow, the redemption male lead in her story finally appeared. I knew that one day, to be with the male lead, she would get rid of me, the side character who humiliated her daily with money, to keep my parents from getting dragged down with me, and to avoid dying a tragic death myself. I struck a deal with the system. As long as I could successfully match her with the male lead, Makoto, the system would help me escape this world and start a new life with my family. Chapter 1. Mr. Wong. The test results are not good. The cancer in your lungs has already started to spread. Without hospitalization, you likely won't survive the month. In the office, the doctor frowned as he looked at the results, his tone filled with regret. I asked calmly, how long could I live if I go through treatment? The doctor glanced at me in my neatly pressed suit, paused, then replied, with your condition, best case, 6 months. Worst case, 3. The treatment will be painful, and the costs are high. I'll try to apply for discounted medication for you. At the mention of cost, I clenched the report and fell silent for a moment before replying. Thank you. I'll forego treatment. Now that the Wong family is bankrupt, I have no money left for medical care. Besides, this illness feels like punishment. I was never meant to recover from it. After leaving the hospital, I instinctively waited for my car. It took a moment to remember the driver had been let go. I was no longer President Wong. I ran through the rain to drive myself. By the time I got back to the villa, my suit was soaked and my hair disheveled. In a rush to change clothes, I opened the door, only to see a woman in a black dress, with elegant features and an air of sophistication, smiling sweetly at her phone, her voice full of affection. Sure, I'll go wherever you want. Nothing matters more to me than you. From the other end of the call came a cheerful voice. Aren't you afraid George will get jealous? The woman smiled even brighter. Why would I care about someone irrelevant? Someone irrelevant. 3 years of marriage, and the woman I love to the core, never once looked me in the eye, never once acknowledged me as her husband. George, how pathetic can you get? I didn't respond, just walked past her silently and went upstairs, but Willow suddenly called out. Wait, I'm going on a trip with my besties tomorrow. I won't be home for a few days. That faint smile still lingered on her usually indifferent face, combined with what I just overheard. It wasn't hard to guess Makoto would be joining too. Still, I nodded, lifted my phone, and sent her money. Seeing my agreement, Willow beamed and went off to pack her suitcase. As we brushed past each other, I suddenly spoke up. From now on, you don't have to. I didn't finish the sentence, because the moment Willow heard my voice, her face instantly turned cold, clearly expecting nothing good to come out of my mouth. I looked into her eyes, so full of ice and contempt, and changed what I was about to say. From now on, you don't need to report anything to me. Go wherever you want. Willow gave me a puzzled glance, then turned and left. It wasn't until I heard the door close that I let out a bitter smile. What I wanted to say was, you don't need to lie to me anymore, because soon I'll set you free. I had always been a top-tier CEO who kept women at arm's length, but 3 years ago, I fell in love with Willow the moment I saw her doing a part-time job. I found out she was a student at University A, beautiful, and constantly pursued by suitors, but she kept her distance from everyone, accepting no favors, just working constantly to make ends meet. I fell for her so hard, I couldn't pull myself out. When I learned she had a parasitic adoptive father and a twisted younger brother, and that she desperately wanted to escape her family, I acted immediately. I paid off all her tuition fees, had people throw her father and brother in jail, and gave her a large sum of money, enough to comfortably finish university. Willow was proud and fiercely independent. She refused to be kept, so I dragged her straight to the civil office and got a marriage certificate. Then I threw a wedding so grand, the entire city of A knew about it. She eventually gave in, wearing a diamond ring the size of a dove egg, dressed in a wedding gown worth a fortune. And in front of all the guests, she said the words, I do. Chapter 2. But even 3 years after marriage, Willow remained distant and indifferent toward me. I thought that if I just treated her a little better, no, a lot better, she would eventually fall in love with me. But that day never came. Instead, a month ago, while I was on the brink of death trying to save Willow, something called the system revealed to me that I was living in a parallel world. And worse, I was the villain forcibly inserted into someone else's story. Willow was the heroine of this world, and Makoto, who had always adored her, was the male lead. According to the original plot, the hero and heroine were destined to fall in love and live happily ever after. But my appearance disrupted everything. In order to correct the story, the system would soon orchestrate an event where Willow meets her long-lost birth parents, billionaires, during an upcoming trip. She would instantly become a rich heiress and completely escape my control. Once she gained power and wealth, she'd lock me in a luxurious cage and torment me day after day. She'd even force me to watch her marry Makoto. Driven mad by jealousy, I'd break out, crash their wedding, and stab Makoto. In the end, Willow would grow to loathe me, locking me away in a dark basement forever, while my family would die tragically on the streets. At first, I didn't take it seriously, but then everything the system warned me about started happening, exactly as described. Still, I kept trying to fight fate. I searched for loopholes in the story, but all that did was accelerate the Wong family's bankruptcy and trigger my own terminal illness. If I didn't let go now, my family would be next. At last, I came to my senses. The hero and heroine were destined to be together. I was just the doomed villain from another universe. To protect my family, I had to give up on Willow and return to my own world. But the system never told me how to leave, it only said the time hasn't come. The next morning, Willow left for her trip with her suitcase neatly packed. As soon as she was gone, a group of people carrying briefcases entered the living room. I read over every document carefully and signed each one. Only when the final signature was done did the manager speak. "Mr. Wong, are you certain you want to liquidate all your assets?" "I'm sure," I replied. Willow would soon become an heiress. I wanted to use what little money I had left to help my family leave before the plot dragged them in. The manager didn't ask any more questions. He said they'd begin evaluating the assets immediately. As the group left with the paperwork, my phone rang. It was David, the friend I had asked to handle my divorce from Willow. I didn't expect news this soon. When I picked up, his voice was hesitant. "George, brace yourself. Try not to freak out." He spoke fast, anxious. "The Civil Affairs Bureau says you two were never legally married. I checked the surveillance footage from back then. Willow never signed anything. The marriage certificate was a forgery. These past 3 years, your marriage wasn't even real." I stood there stunned. Back when we got the certificate, she told me she was craving candied chestnuts. By the time I came back, the certificate was already in hand. I was so giddy with happiness, I didn't suspect a thing. What a joke. I had clung to this marriage all these years, only to find out it was fake from the very beginning. I looked down at the wedding ring she had placed on my finger, and suddenly, I laughed. My eyes turned red. "Willow, you're truly heartless." Still not wanting to believe it, I took the marriage certificate to the bureau for verification. The result was the same, fake. The marriage had never been legally valid. I said nothing. I tore the certificate to shreds and threw it in the trash. Over the next few days, I was busy handling asset sales, coming home late every night. Then one evening, just as I arrived home, I saw Willow, who was supposed to be on her trip, had come back early. She was curled up in a corner of the sofa, hair a mess, lips pale, her exposed skin covered in bruises and cuts. The worst was a deep gash on her right arm, still bleeding. Chapter 3. My pupils contracted, and urgency filled my gaze. "You're hurt? Who did this to you?" The moment Willow heard my voice, she snapped like a lit powder keg. She suddenly raised her hand and slapped me hard. Smack. The sharp sound echoed through the living room. "Stop pretending. It was those 2 psychos you sent. You think I don't know what you're up to? You just want to use those 2 to trap me by your side for the rest of my life, don't you?" Willow screamed hysterically, her entire body trembling in fear, until she passed out on the spot. My breath caught in my throat. In a panic, I scooped her up and rushed her to the hospital. Outside the ward, her best friend Maria explained. On the road, we ran into Willow's adoptive father and her younger brother. They cornered her when she was alone and demanded money. When she refused, they beat her up brutally. When Makoto and I got there, those 2 freaks were already trying to strip her. Bang. I punched the glass window, shattering it. The rage in my eyes couldn't be contained. "This is my fault." Her adoptive father and brother had been in prison. Every year, I paid people inside to make sure they were taken care of. But after news spread that the Wong family had gone bankrupt, those guards clearly got lazy. Ignoring my bleeding knuckles, I immediately called David. "When you have money, you torment people. When you don't, you erase them. Those 2 bastards would disappear soon enough." After the call, I exhaled, exhausted, my voice raspy. "Maria, please take good care of Willow for me from now on." The thought that her once perfect life had spiraled into chaos because of my interference crushed me with guilt. Leaving her was the only path left. Maria was smart. She instantly picked up on something in my tone and tried to talk me out of it. "Don't be upset." Willow was just terrified. "She thought you sent them, but she didn't really mean." I cut her off. "I'm not upset. I'm leaving this place." After this, I didn't get to finish. A cold voice sliced through the air. "Leaving? What? Are you so ashamed that you can't even face me anymore?" Willow stood there, clutching her wounded arm, her expression dark and stormy. Beside her was Makoto, steadying her with one arm. "No, those 2 scumbags weren't sent by me." I stopped mid-sentence. How could I even explain? Should I tell her the Wong family went bankrupt and that's why they came after her? Or that I've been terminally ill, too busy preparing for the end to keep them in check? No matter what I said, she wouldn't believe me. In the end, I didn't explain anything. I simply said, "Yes, I'm manipulative and twisted. That's why I can't face you." Willow gave me a knowing look. In her eyes, I was just a scheming villain. After all, what kind of person would use tricks to force someone into marriage? Makoto, who had listened to the whole exchange, smirked and said gently, "Don't be angry, Willow. Getting worked up over someone that inhuman isn't worth it." His words were soft, but his gaze toward me was full of mockery. Willow didn't notice. She leaned into him, tears brimming in her eyes. "Thank God you and Ting were there. If not, I can't even imagine what they would have done." "Thank you, Makoto. Silly girl, protecting you is what I'm supposed to do," Makoto said, stroking her hair with a doting smile. Their eyes met tenderly. No one else existed in that moment. I stood there, silently soaking in the intimacy between them, the sweet, flirtatious tension. Over the past 3 years, I'd witnessed this scene countless times. Each time, it had torn me apart, but not anymore. This time, I was done. I would let go of all my love for Willow, and completely walk out of her world. Chapter 4. Moments later, when Willow saw that I had only called a regular doctor to examine her, her face immediately fell into a sneer. "What's with the act? If you really feel guilty and want to make it up to me, go find a top specialist. Dragging in an intern, how half-assed can you be?" I froze. I could no longer summon high-profile doctors like I used to, but after a moment of silence, I nodded and agreed. Half an hour later, the top-tier doctor finally arrived. Clearly reluctant, he gave Willow a perfunctory checkup and, unlike before, didn't offer any kind advice or follow-ups. He just tossed out a cold sentence. "Get some rest." Willow had more to say and chased him to the door, but what she saw through the slightly ajar gap made her eyes widen in disbelief. There stood George, once held in high esteem, admired by all, now bowing his head, speaking softly and politely to the doctor. "Director Law, thank you for squeezing this into your busy schedule." Even with his mask on, Director Law's impatience was obvious as he stood with his hands behind his back. "A superficial injury doesn't warrant my personal attention. What a waste of medical resources. If it weren't for David, I wouldn't have bothered coming." I stiffened, bowing again to thank him. Law muttered a few more complaints before arrogantly turning to leave. Watching me remain bowed and motionless for so long, Willow was stunned. She remembered how, in the past, people were always deferential around George. One wrong word and his cold glance alone could send them scrambling with apologies. When had he ever lowered himself like this? But that feeling of surprise didn't last. She quickly convinced herself otherwise. He was always manipulative. This might just be another performance, just a stunt to get her attention. After the checkup, it was confirmed Willow was fine. She just needed rest. I prepared to leave the hospital, but she forced me to stay. In the ward, she laughed and flirted openly with Makoto. They sat close together, their actions intimate, clearly the image of a couple deeply in love. And me, the official husband, sat off to the side, like the outsider. I remembered how I used to force her to smile. She'd oblige, but it was always a forced, bitter one. Now, her smile was genuine. Maybe this is what separates love from indifference. Later, a nurse came in and wheeled Willow away for further tests. Makoto, pretending to act casually, let his phone screen light up. I happened to glance at it and froze. "You took her to get a tattoo, there?" Makoto twirled his phone and grinned wider. "Yup, last Wednesday. And as for why it's over her left chest, that's where Willow said she wanted to keep me, closest to her heart. It's a couple's tattoo." "Nice." "Huh?" His words ended, but my face darkened. "She's allergic to anesthetics. If her immune system is weak, even mild exposure could trigger respiratory failure. And he took her to get a tattoo. With anesthesia. It was dangerous. Without anesthesia, on that spot, it would have been excruciating. But what crushed me most, last Wednesday was our wedding anniversary. She told me she was busy that day, but in reality, she went with another man to get an intimate matching tattoo. Rage surged through me. My fists clenched and began to rise, but the system's voice rang out in my head. "Warning, any harm toward the male lead will put your family in danger." Right. Makoto was the male lead. Willow had always loved him. Whatever she did with him was meant to be. If I lashed out now, the ones to suffer would be my family. I could die from this illness, but I couldn't let harm come to them. So I forced myself to calm down. I dropped the icy look from my face and gave a faint smile. "That tattoo looks nice." Chapter 5. Makoto's smile stiffened. He had expected me to lash out in anger, but instead, I remained eerily calm. A flicker of surprise flashed in his eyes. Almost unwilling to give up, he clenched his fist and punched himself hard in the face. "Mr. Wong, even if you don't like me, you can't just go around hitting people." He covered his cheek and lowered his eyes, looking the perfect image of an aggrieved victim. Before I could react, Willow, despite her injuries, rushed over to check on Makoto with deep concern. Then she raised her head and shot me a glare, sharp and cold as ice. "George, are you out of your mind?" Makoto took her hand, pretending to calm her down, though every word added fuel to the fire. "Willow, Don't be mad. This is all my fault. I was too close to you and made George misunderstand. He probably hit me in a moment of jealousy. I'll keep my distance from now on, just don't be angry with him. You're full of it. I never imagined I'd live to see him and play the role of a manipulative coquette. The words slipped from me before I could think, but Willow gave me no chance to explain. She left me with nothing but a cold rebuke. You've gone too far. Makoto and I are just friends. What right do you have to act like this? Then she took Makoto by the hand and walked away without looking back. I stood frozen, staring at her resolute back. Her words had pierced through me like 1,000 blades, but that was only the beginning. It seemed Makoto was determined to drive me out completely. While we were still in the hospital, he began fabricating all kinds of accusations against me. He claimed I locked him in a utility closet on purpose, said I put a contaminated pillow, used by a contagious patient, on his bed, even spread rumors that I had threatened to throw him into the river. And with each accusation, Willow's gaze toward me grew colder. After yet another false accusation, she finally snapped and slapped me across the face. George, how long are you going to keep this up? Are you going to push Makoto until he's dead? Her face was flushed with anger. I felt a storm of emotions churn within me. During 3 years of marriage, Willow had always been cold, emotionally distant, but the moment something happened to Makoto, she became a different person. I never did anything to him. You can check the security footage, I said calmly, but of course she wouldn't believe me. Her eyes were filled with contempt and disbelief. No need for cameras. Makoto is kind and pure-hearted. You're the one who forced me into marriage. Isn't it obvious who I should trust? I'm warning you, stay away from him. With that, she stormed off. I gave a bitter smile. In this relationship, I was always the one who was never trusted. I didn't plan to get involved any further, but Makoto escalated things. He even began digging into where my family lived. That crossed the line. I couldn't let him threaten them. All he really wanted was Willow. So, on the day she was discharged from the hospital, I pulled Makoto aside and got straight to the point. There's no legal marriage between me and Willow. The marriage certificate was fake. Makoto stared at me in shock. What? That's impossible. He knew very well that the only reason I helped Willow escape her father and brother was in exchange for a marriage. Back then, we held a grand wedding. Everyone knew we were husband and wife. How could the certificate be fake? I met his gaze calmly, my voice low. It's true, we're not legally married, and from now on, you don't have to keep targeting me. I paused, then handed him my medical report. I'm terminally ill. I don't have long to live, and I'm sure you've already heard about the Wong family going bankrupt. I'll be leaving Willow soon. If you really like her, go ahead and pursue her. Just stop making trouble for me. Makoto stared at the report, stunned, half in doubt. I spoke again. Come live at our house. It'll be easier for you two to see each other. Chapter 6. They were going to live together eventually. All I did was help them start a little sooner. Makoto stared at me in disbelief, then his face lit up with excitement. That very day, he moved into the villa. The housekeepers busied themselves with carrying his luggage. I stood on the second floor, watching it all happen, expressionless. As Willow walked past me, she frowned slightly. Makoto was worried. He wanted to come take care of. I know. He's perfect for the job. I cut her off with a smile. My tone was so calm, so indifferent. It unsettled her. That frown on her face stayed for a long time. I didn't care how she felt. I just turned and walked away. That evening, the two men ran into each other in the living room. Makoto spoke first, with a hint of smugness in his voice. Mr. Wong, I hope you don't mind that Willow and I are wearing matching pajamas. I turned to look at him. My eyes were deep, unreadable. I said just one word. No. Makoto froze. He searched my expression, trying to find any trace of jealousy or resentment. But I was calm as still water, completely emotionless. As I turned to head upstairs, Makoto suddenly called out, "You really plan to let her go?" At his words, my hand paused slightly, but I didn't answer. There was nothing to let go of. I was never meant to be part of her story. I had clung to her out of obsession, but now, I was just returning everything to how it was supposed to be. Before bed, I received a video from the master bedroom. In the clip, Willow was wearing matching pajamas with Makoto, playing with his cat. Every now and then, she looked up with a face full of joy and tenderness. I remembered once suggesting we adopt a cat together. She refused, saying she was allergic to cat hair. But now I realized, she wasn't allergic, she just didn't want to raise a pet with me. Toward the end of the video, she picked up the cat, but my eyes locked on her hand. Her fingers were clean and delicate, and on her ring finger was a small, delicate ring. I didn't even need to guess who gave it to her. I looked down and removed the ring from my own hand. In 3 years of marriage, she had never once worn her wedding ring. She never acknowledged me as her husband. She never let me touch her. But with Makoto, none of that seemed to apply. Staring at her smiling face frozen on screen, I raised my hand and tossed my ring into the trash, then quickly typed out a message. You two look like a couple in love, very fitting. After that, I asked the housekeepers to send some things to the master bedroom. A short while later, Makoto messaged me back. Wine, fresh flowers, ambient lighting, you really going all out? Are you sure you're letting go? He'd sent the video hoping to provoke me, but instead of reacting in anger, I was helping them get closer. That wasn't what he expected. I replied quickly, yes. From this moment on, I would return to my original path. No more entanglements with Willow. Makoto kept asking why. I brushed him off with a half-hearted reply. I'm dying, just trying to do something decent before the end. I had just set my phone down when Willow walked in. I thought she'd be pleased with the setup that night, but instead, she looked cold, her expression tight with suppressed anger. George, you even left condoms on the bedside table. What's that supposed to mean? I was caught off guard. I had no idea why she was so angry. I instinctively explained. Just left them there. If you don't need them, toss them. Willow's frown deepened. Seeing how calm I was, like I'd become a different person, she suddenly felt a strange unease inside. She wanted to ask something. The words built up in her chest but never made it out. After a long silence, she left in frustration. After that night, I began looking for excuses to leave the house more often, to give the two of them more time alone. Like tonight, I had planned to watch the meteor shower from the balcony, but just as I stepped out, I got a call for a meeting, so I gave the spot to Makoto instead. Chapter 7. Before I left, I even thoughtfully reminded them. A meteor shower like this is rare. They say couples who see one together are destined to marry. Good omen. Don't miss it. Without waiting for Willow's reaction, I turned and left. At home, there were flowers and surprise gifts placed around deliberately. Every time Willow noticed them, I'd casually emerge and say, must be from Makoto. You mentioned liking that item, and now he's bought it for you. What a great guy. Maybe you should give him something in return. Even the television, usually gathering dust, was constantly playing romantic movies now, with love songs flooding the living room daily. At dinner with the three of us, I even played a wedding highlight reel and stared earnestly at Willow and Makoto. You two really are a perfect match, destined for each other. After a few days of this, Willow began to notice something wasn't right. I hadn't lost my temper once during this entire time. Even my blessings sounded completely sincere. It was like I was trying to pair her with Makoto. Willow froze with a strange feeling in her chest. Could George have found out that the marriage certificate was fake? But she quickly dismissed the thought. No way, she had covered her tracks too well. No one could have discovered it. One evening, after drinking too much at a friend gathering, Willow called me to come pick her up. After hanging up, I sat up in bed and sent Makoto a message. She's drunk. Go pick her up. And don't sleep apart tonight. Share the master bedroom. It's soundproof. I won't hear a thing. Makoto instantly caught the deeper meaning. His heart pounded with excitement as he rushed to the bar to get Willow. She was tipsy and unfocused. When she saw a tall figure approaching, she mistook it for me. In her drunken haze, she reached up and wrapped her arms around his neck, tilting her delicate face up. Her lips were flushed, soft, and inviting, clearly leaning in for a kiss. The friends nearby started cheering. Whoa, Willow's putting on a public love show. The mood's perfect. Go on, kiss her already. Yeah, kiss, kiss. Makoto felt her warm breath on his neck. Her fragrance lingered at the tip of his nose. His throat bobbed involuntarily, eyes fixed on her soft red lips, heart pounding out of control. They were so close. Willow could hear the heavy thumping of his heartbeat, and she giggled. What, you don't want to? That was all it took. Makoto could no longer hold back. He leaned down toward her, but just before their lips met, Maria yanked Willow away, frowning and whispering urgently. Willow, snap out of it. He's Makoto, not George. The words hit Willow like a bolt of lightning. She sobered up instantly, face dark. She returned to the villa and banged furiously on my bedroom door. Open up. Why didn't you come pick me up? The door remained shut. Inside, I had collapsed on the floor, clutching my chest and coughing up blood. The illness had worsened. I didn't want her to see me like this, weak and pathetic. Struggling to breathe, I steadied my voice and said, I wasn't feeling well, so I asked Makoto to go instead. You knew I would. I know. I cut her off. I knew Willow had a bad habit when drunk. She'd randomly kiss people. There were several times her friends got her drunk, and she'd suddenly drop her usual coldness, clinging to me, kissing nonstop. That's exactly why I had Makoto go in my place. Chapter 8. Willow's accusatory words caught in her throat. She stood there in silence for a long moment, recalling all my recent strange behavior. Then, all at once, the anger she'd been holding back erupted. George, what the hell are you trying to do? Is this your way of humiliating us? Even through the door, her cold tone stabbed straight into my chest. I hadn't expected her to see it as humiliation. A sharp ache bloomed in my heart, making even breathing painful. The agony blurred my thoughts, and the words spilled out before I could stop them. I wasn't trying to humiliate you. I was just following the plot. Mid-sentence, I bit my tongue and forced a different line out instead. Yeah, that's right. I am humiliating you. Hearing me say it out loud, Willow's chest rose and fell with fury. George, you're a selfish, manipulative bastard. You never care how others feel. You'll get what's coming to you. She hurled the curse behind her as she turned and stormed off. Inside, I doubled over in a violent fit of coughing. Blood spilled from my lips, trailing down my chin, and yet I still managed a weak smile. Retribution. I was already feeling it. From Willow's reaction, I finally understood. She hated being controlled. Once I realized that, I stopped trying to interfere. It didn't matter anyway. Everything was about to end. The next day, I brought out a signed stack of legal documents and dismissed all the household staff. Willow stared at me, confused. I spoke calmly. This is everything I own. I've signed it all over to you. The house is yours now too. I know you never liked the servants. You thought they were spies I planted to watch you. So I let them all go. From now on, you can hire whoever you like. Then I pulled out a neat box filled with letters. These are the love letters I wrote to you over the years. I know you never read them. They're just in the way now, might as well burn them. Truthfully, I never wanted to force Willow into anything. At first, I genuinely wanted to pursue her properly. But then I overheard how her leech of an adoptive father and that psychotic younger brother planned to sell her off to marry some mentally challenged men in a remote village. I panicked. That's why I forced her into marriage. Why I kept her by my side. But I was wrong. I thought I was her savior. But all I'd done was become the obstacle in her life. She was the heroine she never needed saving. Makoto, the male lead, was always going to show up. A trace of guilt passed through my eyes. I'm sorry. I was a burden to you. From now on, you'll have a new life. I picked up the box and dumped it into the fire pit. The letters, once full of love, were instantly devoured by flames, rising as ash into the air. What the hell are you doing? Willow's heart clenched as she listened to me speak like I was settling my final affairs. Through the haze of smoke, I looked at her, calm, and finally at peace. I debated whether or not to tell her about the illness, but then she spoke again, her voice sharp as frost. What now, George? Switching tactics again. When manipulation didn't work, now you're trying to act pitiful. That cut off any impulse I had to speak the truth. Forget it. At this point, whatever she thought no longer mattered. I stayed silent. Willow's expression flickered with unease. She wasn't stupid, she knew something was off with me lately. Seeing how pale I looked, she wanted to ask if I was sick, but what came out of her mouth instead was, "You're not seriously faking an illness, are you?" The sarcasm in her tone, the contempt in her eyes. Once, it would have gutted me, but this time, I felt oddly calm. "Don't worry," I said quietly. "You'll get exactly what you want soon enough." Chapter 9. Willow didn't catch the weight behind my words. She simply scoffed and went upstairs without another glance. I watched her retreating back, feeling nothing. "Willow, forget me. Forget this chapter of your life. Let's both return to the paths we were meant to walk." The day before I was set to leave was my birthday. I dressed in formal attire and knocked on Willow's door. "It's my birthday. I want to eat at the restaurant where we first met. Will you come with me?" Morning light streamed through the window and brushed my face with a rare touch of warmth. Seeing the familiar smile on my lips, something twisted in Willow's chest, but her expression remained cold and impassive. Okay. That afternoon, the two of us arrived at the seaside restaurant, both dressed to the nines. A soft ocean breeze swept into the private dining room, carrying with it the stillness of midday sun. The table was covered with an array of dishes, all of them Willow's favorites. She felt something stir in her chest, but didn't say anything. I didn't notice. Instead, I found myself recalling a similar afternoon 3 years ago. By pure chance, I'd stepped into that same restaurant and spotted her arranging a vase. She wore a simple white outfit, her porcelain skin glowing, and when she turned to look at me, those eyes, misty like water, had me instantly captivated. Willow seemed to be lost in her own memory too. Out of nowhere, she said, "If only I'd been born into a normal family." There was a faint, almost invisible sorrow behind her eyes. I smiled gently. "Don't worry, that wish is going to come true very soon." Her biological parents had already acquired her DNA. Barring any surprises, they'd reunite with her soon. She'd become an heiress, and I would quietly vanish from her world. Just as we were about to eat, Willow's phone rang. Makoto's anxious voice came through the receiver. "Willow, Dottie's sick. I don't know what to do. Can you come back and check on her?" Dottie was the kitten they raised together. Without hesitation, Willow stood up. "George, I have something urgent. You eat without me." She expected me to be upset, to try and stop her, but I only looked at her calmly, my voice soft and composed. "I understand. Go take care of it." Staring into my emotionless eyes, Willow's heart pounded out of rhythm. That suffocating sense of helplessness gripped her like a snake, coiling tightly around her chest. For once, Her tone softened. Wait here. Okay, I'll be back soon. I smiled and nodded, my voice warmer than ever. All right, I'll wait for you, reassured. Willow turned and left. I watched her fading silhouette and added under my breath, of course I'll wait for you, because this will be the last time we ever see each other. But she didn't come back. Instead, I caught a whiff of something sharp, something foul, like rotten eggs. The moment I sensed something was wrong and tried to move, a searing pain shot through my lungs like a knife. I dropped to my knees, clutching my chest. Cough, cough. Blood flecked my lips, every breath like a knife tearing through me. The pain swallowed me whole. Boom. A violent explosion rocked the air. Blistering heat rushed at me like a wave. In a daze, I could faintly hear the system saying something, but another explosion shattered the sound completely. With pain crashing over me and the air growing thinner, my consciousness began to fade. In that moment, I realized the system had moved my death up. I wiped the blood from my lips and let out a calm, relieved smile. Willow, I won't get to see you again. This time, it really is goodbye. And with that, I passed out completely. Chapter 10. It wasn't until 3 days later that Willow thought of George again. She and Makoto were on the way to the vet with Dottie when they unexpectedly ran into her biological parents. After the initial shock, Willow calmly accepted the truth. She was the long-lost daughter of one of the wealthiest families in the country. Her parents were thrilled and soon hosted a grand banquet to officially announce her as their heiress. Coincidentally, their last name was also Liu. After 3 hectic days, Willow had successfully rejoined her birth family. Now, all of high society knew her name. Once everything settled down, Willow stood in front of a mirror, admiring her reflection. She was radiant in haute couture, and for the first time in a long while, there was a real smile on her face. It all felt like a dream. The perfect background she had always longed for had become reality. She no longer needed to rely on George for protection from her twisted adoptive father and brother. Thinking of that, she suddenly remembered she had stood George up. Panicked, she pulled out her phone and called him, but all she got was a cold, mechanical voice. The number you have dialed is not in service. Please check the number and try again. A faint sense of unease crept into her chest. She ordered the driver to take her to the old villa, but when she opened the door, the house was empty. On the table, George had left behind the documents he once gave her. Don't worry, I'll give you what you want, very soon. His voice echoed in her mind, making her heart beat faster with anxiety. Recalling all his strange behavior recently, Willow frowned instinctively. What's he up to now? Running away from home like a kid? But George wasn't that childish, so she ordered the driver to take her to the restaurant instead. When she arrived, what she saw nearly knocked the breath out of her. The once luxurious seaside restaurant was now a burned-out ruin. The air reeked of charred debris. Police tape surrounded the perimeter, blocking anyone from approaching. The driver explained that 3 days ago, in the afternoon, a gas leak had caused an explosion, and one of the guests inside had been burned alive. Willow staggered back 2 steps, her face ashen, barely able to keep her balance. No way, he couldn't be dead. She still clung to a sliver of hope. There weren't many people dining that day, surely it couldn't have been him. But that fragile hope was quickly shattered. The butler brought over surveillance footage from before the incident. In the video, she saw him clutching his chest, collapsing, saw the blood on his lips, the struggle in his breath, and heard his final words before everything was engulfed in flames. Willow, I couldn't wait for you. This time, it's really goodbye. Then the explosion consumed it all. He was dead. He was really dead. Where's the body? Where's the body? Willow grabbed the butler by the sleeve, eyes wide in disbelief. The butler hesitated, then said softly, Miss, the police confirmed Mr. Wang's identity. The body was severely charred and unrecognizable. It was claimed by family yesterday and buried. At that, Willow's legs gave out beneath her. She collapsed to the ground, trembling so hard she couldn't even hold her phone. She remembered his calm, distant gaze that day, like he already knew what would happen. No, it wasn't supposed to end like this. He can't be gone. As if waking from a fog, she suddenly ordered a full investigation into George's final days. She wanted proof that he was still alive, but what she received hit her like a sledgehammer. Willow stood in the study, took a deep breath, and shakily opened the file folder in her hands. The very first page was George's medical record. At the diagnosis section, it read in bold letters, advanced stage lung cancer. The date was 1 month ago. At the bottom of the page, George had personally signed to decline further treatment. Willow's hands trembled. The paper nearly slipped through her fingers. So the pale complexion, the weight loss, even those occasional bloody tissues in the trash, none of it was an act. He really was sick. Chapter 11. The memory of her own words, her curse that George would suffer karma, her mocking accusation that he was faking illness, stabbed through Willow's heart like knives. As she continued flipping through the file, She came upon the reason he had refused treatment. Because the Wang family had gone bankrupt. He had sold off all his assets, half for his family, half left to her. He never thought of himself. The next page showed him standing outside the Civil Affairs Bureau, holding their marriage certificate. After confirming the truth, he tore it in half and threw it into a trash bin, calmly. Willow's face turned ghostly pale, her teeth sinking into her bottom lip. He knew. He had known everything. The marriage certificate was fake. The 3-year-long marriage was a lie. Willow knew how deeply George had loved her. She couldn't even begin to imagine how painful it must have been for him to discover the truth. And then she remembered his last words. How? Right before his death, he'd said he couldn't wait for her anymore. The pain hit her like a piece of her soul had been carved out and was bleeding uncontrollably. She drifted around the empty villa for days, numb. Eventually, her parents couldn't stand watching her waste away. They sent someone to bring her home. Before leaving, she asked the housekeepers to pack up George's belongings. But they searched the entire villa and didn't find a single trace of him. Only then did Willow realize. George had erased every part of himself. Remembering all his strange behavior recently, she started piecing it together. Even though the police confirmed the man who died in the explosion was George, her instincts screamed otherwise. He'd planned his departure. That's why he had prepared everything in advance. That's why he allowed Makoto to move in. That's why he burned the box of love letters. Back at the Liu family estate, Willow locked herself in her room. She played the video from the restaurant over and over. Pain and despair poured from her eyes. But more than anything, what consumed her now was regret. George had clearly shown signs of distress, of something wrong, but she'd ignored them all, brushing it off as another act. Clutching the bedsheet tightly, her bloodshot eyes stared at the screen. In the haze of grief, she seemed to see George's familiar smile in front of her. She reached out instinctively, only for the image to vanish into mist. Knock, knock, knock. A frantic knocking at the door. Before she could respond, someone burst in. Makoto rushed in and immediately saw her curled in a corner, disheveled, pale, and hollow-eyed. His chest tightened. He hurried forward, trying to help her up, but the moment his hand reached out, she flinched away. Willow, stop this already. We're all worried about you. He tried to mask his pain with a gentle frown, but she didn't move, not even a blink. Frustration crept into his voice. What's the difference? He was going to die anyway, whether from the explosion or the cancer. Willow, you faked the marriage certificate so you could leave him one day, didn't you? Now you've finally got what you wanted, so why aren't you happy? Her once dull eyes suddenly sparked with sharp light. She stared directly at Makoto, her voice cold and cutting. How do you know the marriage certificate was fake? Not even Maria had known about that. Where had he heard it? Makoto had never seen her so unhinged. His expression faltered, and for a moment, he couldn't form a single word. Eventually, under Willow's relentless pressure, he broke. He told her everything George had once said. It had been in the file too. Willow had just missed it. But now, hearing it from Makoto's mouth, 2 tears slipped from her eyes and fell silently. It's all my fault. I killed him. Makoto frowned and objected. No, Willow, this wasn't your fault. He forced you into marriage. He took you away from me. If not for him, we would have been together already. Now he's gone. You're finally free. Everything's back to the beginning. We can start over. I never wanted to be free of him. Chapter 12. Willow suddenly lifted her head, eyes blazing as she glared at him. Her voice trembled with anger. Makoto was startled. Locking eyes with her fury-filled gaze, a wave of unfamiliarity washed over him. He muttered, "What are you saying? Don't you like me? Didn't you always want to be with me?" Willow had never said it outright, but after so many years, he had always believed their feelings were mutual, unspoken, but understood. I didn't. I don't. Her eyes reddened as she tried to refute him, but it was as if her throat had been seized. The words refused to come out. I don't like you. Silence fell over the room like a blanket. Then she collected herself, her voice calm and distant. You should go. I don't want to see you again. Willow didn't even fully understand what was happening to her. Anytime she saw Makoto upset, she'd instinctively try to comfort him. She'd try to make him smile, but that was never what she really wanted. It was just like the last 3 years, she had tried to get along with George. Tried to say something kind, but every time she built up the courage, her words turned cold and biting at the last second. Only when drunk could she express what she really felt. That's why she'd intentionally gotten drunk that night, hoping George would come for her. But he didn't. She used to feel like she was living in a pre-written script, but George's death had finally awakened her. She realized now, the one she loved wasn't Makoto, it was George. And once that truth hit her, a wild, uncontrollable panic spread through her chest. 1 year later, a company neighboring City A had just gone public. At the evening banquet celebrating its IPO, many business elites came to offer congratulations. Amidst the clinking glasses and murmured toasts, The CEO finally entered, surrounded by his staff. I was dressed in a sharp, tailored suit. My expression was cold, distant. With one slender hand, I adjusted my gold-rimmed glasses, exuding an unapproachable aura. The sheer pressure of my presence made many instinctively lower their heads. Mr. Wang, we're ready to begin. With a slight nod from me, the banquet formally commenced. I wasn't fond of noise. After exchanging a few polite words, I slipped away to the balcony alone to enjoy the moonlight. But of course, some people never knew when to back off. A woman in an elegant gown approached, swirling the champagne in her hand. Mr. Wang, long time no see. I turned my head. My deep gaze was as calm as ever. When she saw my face, Willow unconsciously took a few steps closer. Only when she caught the faint cedar scent on me did she finally realize. George was standing right in front of her, alive and real. I remained silent. Her voice trembled slightly as she spoke again. Mr. Wang. I looked at her, voice still as pleasant as ever, but my next words crushed her. Do I know you? I frowned slightly, tilting my head as if trying to recall. Willow froze, completely unprepared for my response. Her lips parted, but no words came. I stood and gave her a once-over. There was no ripple in my eyes, not even a flicker. Miss, I don't believe we've met. And this is a private space. I kindly ask that you not disturb me again. With that, two polite but firm bodyguards stepped forward and ushered her away. Only after that slender figure disappeared from view did I hurriedly set down my glass. My calm eyes were suddenly full of panic. How did she find me? And how did she recognize me? 1 year ago, after the restaurant explosion, the George that belonged to Willow's world had indeed died. The system had returned me to my original parallel universe. Here, I wasn't a villain, just an ordinary businessman. That's the essence of a parallel world. Same timeline, different dimensions. Willow and I were like two parallel lines, never meant to intersect. Even if we did meet, we'd be strangers. She wasn't supposed to remember anything. But now, everything had been broken. Chapter 13. After leaving City A, I learned from the system that my presence as a villain had altered the course of the story. After Willow was reunited with her wealthy birth parents, she didn't immediately expose the fake marriage. In fact, she publicly grieved over my death, weeping uncontrollably. And the original plotline, her romantic relationship with Makoto and their eventual happily ever after, never happened. Instead, she kept insisting to the public that she was married. She even had an oversized wedding photo printed and hung in her room. Everyone said she must have loved her late husband too much to move on. But to me, it felt more like hate. Hate for how I had trapped her for 3 years. I wanted to get to the bottom of it all. But the system had vanished after returning me to my original world. Its final words were that it had to go correct the deviation in the narrative. I stared up at the hazy moonlight, my head spinning slightly as a strange pain tightened in my chest. For a brief moment, I couldn't tell which world I was actually in. That thought made me leave the banquet early and head home. If I could just get back to my house, I'd know for sure which world this was. When I had returned to my original world, my parents' memories of Willow had been wiped clean. It was as if they'd never even heard of her. Say her name, and they'd just look confused. Just as I was about to get into the car, that slender figure appeared again. Mr. Wang, what a coincidence. Could you give me a ride? Willow didn't seem affected at all by what had happened earlier. She smiled brightly, as if nothing had happened. That familiar voice made my hand freeze on the car keys, but I kept my expression cold. Sorry, that's inconvenient. With that, I opened the car door, stepped in, and shut it behind me. But she placed her hand gently on the window and hesitated. Mr. Wang, you do recognize me, don't you? My entire body tensed. My grip on the steering wheel tightened. In the silence, I could hear my heart pounding violently. Memories surged up like a rising tide. If Willow said that, it meant she remembered me. The hesitation in her voice, maybe she couldn't believe that the man who supposedly died in a fire a year ago was now standing alive in front of her. Whatever the reason, I couldn't admit I knew her. Not now. So I curled my lips into a faint smirk, letting a cold edge creep into my voice. Miss, there are plenty of women who try this trick to get my attention every day. You're not exactly subtle. I'm not like them. You know that. Willow's voice was firm. Her eyes locked onto mine, searching for any crack in my facade. We don't know each other. Please respect boundaries. With that, I rolled up the window without another word. I knew Willow well. She had a lot of pride. After being rejected this bluntly, any warmth should have burned out. But this time, I was wrong. Just as I started the engine, she chased after the car and called out, Mr. Wang, can I buy you a coffee tomorrow? I'll wait for you right here. I'm busy. I won't have a minute to spare. I turned her down directly, but Willow only heard what she wanted to hear. All right, then let's meet the day after tomorrow. Please don't forget. At that, I couldn't help but frown and glance at her again, this time with curiosity. She had changed. The Willow I knew used to be aloof, hard to approach. always orbiting around Makoto. Now, she was persistent, even shamelessly so. I didn't respond. The car sped away. In the rearview mirror, her figure grew smaller and smaller, until it disappeared entirely. Only then did I let out a breath. Back at home, the first thing I did was pull my mother aside. Mom, do you remember Willow? My mother looked puzzled. Willow? Son, I've never heard you mention that name. Is she your girlfriend? Chapter 14. At that moment, my father came over with a plate of freshly washed fruit, smiling warmly. You've got a girlfriend. Bring her home for dinner sometime. My younger sister, always eager to be included, chimed in cheerfully. Is your girlfriend pretty, big brother? Can I play with her? None of them remembered Willow. This really was my world. It must have been something on her side that went wrong. I finally let out a breath of relief. As long as I wasn't the villain anymore, and my family was safe, that was enough. Whatever was happening with Willow, the system that was supposed to correct the storyline would surely step in. I didn't need to interfere, as long as I kept pretending I didn't know her. I gave a faint smile and brushed off the girlfriend talk vaguely. Then we all sat down to a warm, peaceful dinner. That night, I had a strange dream. I dreamed Willow was crying at my grave. I dreamed she shoved Makoto away with her own hands. I dreamed she told her parents she truly loved me. Countless fragments of chaotic images flashed through my mind. But what lingered was the sound of her sobbing in agony. I jolted upright in bed, heart pounding wildly. Thinking back on the dream, it felt absurd. Willow, love me. We'd been together for 3 years, day and night, morning to night. If I had felt even the faintest hint of love from her, I would have stayed with her, even in death. But now, she hadn't ended up with the male lead. She was living like a widow. She had even chased me across worlds. Maybe this was all a ripple effect from how I had disrupted the plot. Once the system fixed it, everything would return to how it was supposed to be. The next morning, as I was getting ready to leave, a wave of dizziness hit me. A sudden, stabbing pain spread across my chest. I clutched my lungs, gasping for breath. Only after a long while did the pain finally subside. That sensation, it was identical to what I felt before I almost died of lung failure. I sat frozen in the car, dazed. Memories swirled in my head, jumbled together, and once again, I couldn't tell which world I was in. Just then, my phone rang, dragging me back to reality. It was my assistant. Mr. Wong, your physical report just came back. Everything else is normal. But the doctor mentioned something unusual about your lungs. He recommends a detailed follow-up. Would you like me to schedule it? I was silent for a long moment. Yes, schedule it as soon as possible. Knock knock. Right after I hung up, someone tapped on the car window. I looked up. There she was, Willow, dressed elegantly, perfectly made up. When I rolled the window down, she greeted me with a radiant smile. Her tone was light and cheerful. Mr. Wong, so you really do live here? That's great. Would you have time to join me for lunch today? The moment she spoke, my vision blurred. Even the space around us seemed to ripple. Only when I looked away did it return to normal. Willow reached for the car door. Intending to get in, I instinctively frowned. A strange irritation welled up inside me. I had already chosen to walk away, to give her and the male lead a clean path forward. So why wasn't she following the story properly? Why come here chasing after me? The feeling lingered for a moment, but once Willow sat in the passenger seat, my emotions suddenly leveled out again. I looked at her as if she were a stranger. Something was off. Ever since Willow reappeared, my memories of the past had started blurring, like someone was deliberately erasing them. Sometimes I felt annoyed, but more often, I felt something deeper, a strange, pervasive sense of unfamiliarity. Her words felt unfamiliar. Her presence felt unfamiliar. I didn't understand why, but one thing I was sure of: Willow wasn't supposed to be here. Chapter 15. On the way to the restaurant, I decided to probe her a little. Why are you so intent on buying me lunch? It was the first time I initiated conversation. Willow's eyes lit up with surprise and a glimmer of hope. George, I knew you remembered me. Miss, I don't know who you are. Please watch your words. My tone was calm, but the impatience beneath it was clear. I sounded like someone speaking to a stranger, utterly unfamiliar. Hearing that, Willow lowered her head, visibly hurt. But it wasn't just the words, it was the fact that George refused to acknowledge her. The truth was, over the past year, she'd been searching for any trace of George. Everything she heard pointed to the same thing: he had died in the explosion. Until a week ago, at her parents' request, she had traveled to City C to visit some relatives. While browsing the brochure at her hotel, she happened to see a headline about Wong Corporation going public. Under normal circumstances, she wouldn't have paid any attention to corporate news. But something about that name, just the surname, caught her eye. She went to the banquet without hesitation. Strangely, none of the event staff recognized her. They hadn't even heard of her parents. Still, Relying on her quick wit, she found her way in. And that's when she saw George. He didn't look much different from how she remembered him. Only his demeanor and appearance had changed. The once playful, warm-hearted man had become cold and distant. Now he wore rimless gold glasses he used to dislike, and carried himself with quiet dominance. He was both unfamiliar and familiar, but Willow was certain this was George. So she had approached, eyes unwavering. "George, are you planning to spend the rest of your life pretending not to know me?" I was driving and couldn't avoid her proximity. My brows furrowed as I spoke. "I already told you, I don't know you. There's nothing to acknowledge, and we're not close. Please stop addressing me so casually. People might get the wrong idea." My words were firm and final. I refused to admit any connection. After all, as long as I didn't acknowledge her, Willow had no proof. In her world, George had died in the fire. The version of me standing before her now wasn't supposed to exist. There shouldn't have been any overlap between us. Willow hadn't expected such complete rejection. She looked deeply wounded. Her misty eyes stared at me as she spoke each word with painful clarity. "George, 4 years ago, when we got married, you promised you'd take care of me for the rest of your life." She raised her hand, revealing the wedding ring. "This ring, you put it on me yourself. Have you forgotten? And there's something else that's always bothered me. After you disappeared, I tried to find your family, but they were nowhere to be found. When I hired people to investigate, they came back saying your family never existed at all. They said George was an orphan. But now here in City C, there's a man who looks exactly like you, with a family that's also exactly the same. Tell me, how can all of this just be a coincidence?" Her voice was pressing now, every question closer to the truth. I narrowed my eyes at her, something in my gaze turning analytical. Back when we got married, my parents had wanted to spend more time with her, but she coldly shut them out. And now, after we'd separated, she was acting like a different person, investigating every detail of my past. My voice grew slightly sarcastic. "Miss, I've lived in City C my entire life. I've never been married. My family is right here. I have no idea who you're talking about. And as for people sharing names, the world's full of them. Isn't that perfectly normal?" Chapter 16. While I was driving toward the restaurant, I casually asked, "So why are you so desperate to treat me to lunch?" It was the first time I spoke voluntarily. Willow's eyes sparkled with surprise and joy. "George, I knew you remembered me." "Miss, I don't know you. Please mind your words." My tone was calm but laced with clear impatience, as if she really were just a stranger to me. Willow fell silent, momentarily at a loss for words, but after a pause, something seemed to dawn on her. So when I stopped the car, she suddenly lunged forward, shoving me back into the seat and hastily reaching for the buttons on my shirt. "You are George. I can prove it." She was so close, and the car was too small for me to push her away without touching something I shouldn't. As I hesitated, she swiftly pulled open my shirt, exposing my back. She stared. The skin was smooth and unmarked. The long scar she remembered was gone. Willow deflated like a popped balloon. Shock spread across her face. "No, where is it? Where's your scar?" I calmly fixed my clothes, looking at her coldly. "I've told you already, I'm not the man you know. And if you try anything like that again, I won't hesitate to call the police." I knew the scar she was talking about. It came from the time she got into trouble defending Makoto. I had stepped in and ended up getting stabbed by a thug. It was a serious wound. I was rushed to the ICU. That near-death moment was when the system had first appeared. I'd barely survived, and the injury had left a long scar on my back, a physical reminder of what I'd done for her. But here in my original world, I had never been hurt for Willow, so naturally, there was no scar. Willow wasn't ready to give up. She reached out again, trying to look elsewhere, but one icy glare from me stopped her cold. "I've met plenty of women like you, making up stories just to crawl into a man's bed. Have you no self-respect?" Her body froze. Pain tightened in her chest. Did he just say, "I'm trying to seduce him"? Her eyes turned red, and it took everything in her to hold back tears. "I'm sorry, Mr. Wong. That was reckless of me. My name is Willow, and I'm not following you around just to sleep with you." After she finished, she gave me one last look and opened the door to leave. She didn't even mention lunch again. Watching her walk away, defeated and silent, I realized I may have gone too far with my words, but I had no excuse to chase after her now. Maybe this misunderstanding was for the best. At least it would help her give up for good. After all, those 3 years of marriage weren't exactly happy. There was no reason to dwell on the past. She'd forged a fake marriage certificate. Didn't that mean she never wanted to be associated with me in the first place? Now that she got her wish, why was she still clinging to me, desperate for answers? That night, I thought she'd finally leave for good. But the next day, after I came out of my medical checkup at the hospital, there she was, waiting outside. She glanced at the report in my hand, her eyes tinged with worry. This time, I didn't even bother pretending to be polite. I just walked past her without a word. When I finally shut my front door, I was still full of confusion. What is Willow trying to do? Is this some kind of revenge for me forcing her to marry me back then? But she faked the certificate. We even had separate bedrooms. By any standard, it wasn't even a real marriage, barely even a relationship. Did she think I was behind her adoptive father and brother harassing her? Is that why she's here, to punish me? But I died waiting for her birthday dinner. Wasn't that enough? Besides, I never meant for her to get hurt. Now she's the daughter of billionaires. She has money, time, a whole life ahead of her. Why chase after a man who's already supposed to be dead? That night, in 2 separate rooms, neither of us could sleep. Willow hadn't left City C. She was staying in a hotel near my house. In her room, she played the video from the restaurant over and over again, bitterness welling up inside her. George, did you really die? Chapter 17. 3 days later, I traveled to City A for business negotiations, and Willow followed closely behind. She stayed at just the right distance, watching me speak confidently with business partners, watching me pass by the very place where I had supposedly died in that explosion, watching me order dishes almost identical to the ones I used to like. Everything about me seemed to say I had never been there before, and yet, my gestures, my preferences, felt undeniably familiar. After several days of this, Willow was completely lost. She couldn't tell anymore. Was the George in front of her really him? When my trip ended and I prepared to return to City C, Willow could no longer hold back. She stepped forward and stopped me. Mr. Wong, do you really not remember me? All this time, she hadn't been able to understand why George would pretend not to know her, or how there could be someone in this world exactly like him. This time, as I looked at her, a flicker of confusion crossed my eyes. My tone was colder, more distant than ever. Miss, are you sure you haven't mistaken me for someone else? We've never met. I spoke with firm certainty, expression utterly calm, as if I were looking at a stranger. Willow's breath caught in her throat. A wave of humiliation and disbelief hit her like a punch. George, what are you doing? The moment she spoke my name, a violent, stabbing pain flared in my chest, and my mind spiraled into chaos. I clutched my shirt, face contorted with pain. Willow panicked at the sight of my pale face and rushed to support me, voice shaking. What's wrong? Does it hurt? I'm calling an ambulance right now. I took several deep breaths, forcing the pain down, gritting my teeth as I spoke. No, I'm fine, but I wasn't. Not really. The follow-up tests said my lungs were clear, and yet, the pain had become more and more frequent, the kind of pain I remembered vividly from the late stages of lung cancer, and it had started the moment Willow reappeared. Willow froze mid-call. Seeing my color return, she breathed a little easier, but the abrupt moment had broken the flow. She didn't know what to say anymore. Noticing her awkwardness, I let out a quiet sigh. Get in, I'll take you home. She didn't hesitate and quickly slid into the passenger seat, just as she opened her mouth to give me the address. I started the engine and pulled out. I was already driving in the direction of the Liu family villa. Before she could ask, I spoke first. You've been trying so hard to prove I'm still alive. Why? I could tell she wouldn't let this go, so I stopped pretending. Of course, there was another reason I'd dropped the act. I realized everything around me was unraveling. If I didn't figure out a way to fix it soon, it might drag my family into it too. Ever since Willow showed up at the banquet, my memories had been a mess. The chest pain had become unpredictable. I was afraid that one day, I really would drop dead, or worse, my memory would be wiped. And I'd forget my family, forget everything. Willow stared at me, her eyes filling with tears. He finally admitted it. She had so much to say, but when she opened her mouth, all that came out was a single, trembling sentence. I don't know. What she had meant to say was, I wanted to see you again. I wanted to tell you I'm sorry. I shouldn't have forged that marriage certificate. I shouldn't have said all those cruel things. More than anything, I wanted to ask you, was it because you stopped loving me? That you didn't tell me you were dying? After you left, the house felt so empty. I hated it. That's when I realized, I can't stand a life without you. George, is this what love is? Then why can't I say it out loud? Chapter 18. That sense of helpless confusion surged up once again. The love she tried so desperately to express had twisted into unprovoked sarcasm. Aren't you supposed to be dead? Why are you back? The one I love is Makoto, not you. Can you stop clinging to me? You think you can still threaten me with money? I have my biological parents now. I'll never be forced by you again. George, for all the humiliation you put me through, I'll make you pay. How about I build a custom cage just for you and torture you in it day and night? I stared at her in astonishment. Never had I seen someone embody such contradiction so vividly. Her words were venomous, her facial muscles taut with fury, yet her eyes shimmered with pain and longing. as if everything she said had been forced out of her. In that moment, I suddenly remembered the system's earlier warning. It told me Willow and I were never meant to meet. But due to a twist of fate, and my obsession, I fell in love with her and forcibly inserted myself into her life, altering the course of her story. If things were to return to their original path, I had to leave, and everything tied to me in this world would vanish. Defying fate would only lead to the narrative turning against me. I didn't believe it, so I ended up with a terminal illness. After regretting everything, the system sent me back to my original world. Now, Willow didn't believe it either. But since she's the female lead, at most her memory would be erased. As for me, now that I've entangled myself in her storyline again, my memories from both worlds have begun to blur. My once healthy body suffers from phantom pain. If this continues, I'll completely forget who I really am, and then, I'll vanish from everyone's mind. I'll cease to exist in this world. That's why we're destined to return to our respective worlds. We can never intertwine again, because in Willow's world, I'm already dead. Once I understood that, I said nothing more. I took Willow home and left immediately. I didn't look back. I didn't respond to her bewildered calls. Willow watched the car grow smaller and smaller, her heart aching to chase after it, but her body wouldn't move. Rooted to the ground, she wanted to call out to George. Even recalling his name took effort. When she finally opened her mouth, she couldn't quite understand why she wanted to say it. A dazed helplessness enveloped her completely, until Makoto came out of the house and pulled her into a close embrace. Willow, you're back. Why didn't you tell me? I could have picked you up from the station. Hearing his voice, so familiar yet so foreign, filled her with unease. She couldn't understand why he was here at all. After that argument a year ago, she hadn't seen Makoto again. But now, he acted as if nothing had happened between them. As if some part of his memory had been wiped clean. He was going through the motions, saying and doing what he was supposed to. It was eerie. Like a script written in advance. If a bug appeared, it would just reset and start over. Willow didn't know what was happening, but she hated this feeling of being manipulated. Her scrambled memories began to sort themselves out with Makoto's appearance. She turned and walked toward the villa. Suddenly, she seemed to understand why George refused to acknowledge her. If he could pull away, that meant even things set in stone could be changed. Makoto followed behind her, chattering with concern nonstop. Willow, did anything fun happen while you were visiting relatives in Sea City? Was it super busy? You didn't reply to any of my messages. I missed you so much while you were gone. Are we even that close? Don't say things that cross the line. Chapter 19. Willow's face suddenly turned cold as she snapped at him, her icy gaze devoid of any warmth. Makoto's smile froze. He was clearly caught off guard, but he still spoke in a gentle tone. Willow, were the past few days too exhausting for you? Or maybe I haven't been attentive enough lately, and that's why you're upset. I can apologize. As he spoke, he grinned playfully and tried to pull her into his arms, but Willow stepped away impatiently. Get lost. I don't want to see you. With that, she ignored him completely and walked straight into the house. Makoto's face twisted with a flash of grievance that quickly darkened into hatred. It was all George's fault. If it weren't for him, Willow wouldn't be treating him so coldly. That manipulative bastard, still haunting Willow even in death. Ever since the explosion, Willow had grown to deeply resent him. But before that, she clearly had feelings for him too. If he'd known things would end up like this, he never should have kept George's bankruptcy and terminal illness a secret. Maybe if Willow had seen how pitiful George truly was, she would have felt disgusted instead of longing. Thinking of this, Makoto let out a sigh, a wave of helplessness washing over him. But what was the point of saying any of this now? George was dead. From now on, no one could shake his place in Willow's heart. Still, it didn't matter. She would marry him eventually. Makoto smiled confidently and stepped into the villa. Sure enough, he was warmly welcomed by Willow's parents the moment he walked in. Makoto, why were you outside so long? Willow's back. Go catch up with her, Mother Lu said with a beaming smile, waving for him to sit. Father Lu, usually stern-faced, also greeted him with rare warmth. You're always so polite. But you'll be family soon anyway, no need to act like a guest. Already irritated, Willow completely snapped at the word family. Dad, what nonsense are you talking about? Father Lu paused in surprise, then explained. Willow, haven't you always liked Makoto? Your mom and I talked it over. We thought we'd finalize the marriage arrangements in the next few days. It's something you've always wanted. Before she could say a word, Makoto jumped in. Uncle, Auntie, there's no need to rush. Willow and I have been in love for years. What's a little more time? We should pick a good date. Yes, a wedding is a serious matter. They both chimed in, smiling. Watching them happily discuss the wedding plans, Willow's heart trembled. Her expression darkened. And finally, just as they were about to settle on a wedding dress, she exploded. No one's getting married. I'm not marrying Makoto. She practically shouted the words, her voice hoarse from how loudly she screamed. All three of them froze. Makoto stared at her, openly wounded. The silence dragged on until Father Lu cleared his throat and tried to break the tension. I think there's some misunderstanding between you two. Young people shouldn't act so impulsively. Why don't you sit down and talk things out? We have something to take care of. He gave Willow a gentle nudge and left the room with Mother Lu. The house staff, catching the mood, discreetly made their exit. Moments later, the spacious living room was left with just the two of them standing face to face. Makoto hesitated, then spoke first. Willow, what's going on with you? Willow looked at him coldly, her eyes full of frost. Her words, too, carried no warmth. Makoto, when did I ever say I wanted to marry you? We've never even dated. What gives you the right to go behind my back and tell my parents we've been in love for years? Chapter 20. Makoto tried to explain, but she cut him off again. And as for how you framed George back then, I've already shown enough generosity by not holding you accountable. Don't push your luck and try to control my life. From the moment she saw how overly enthusiastic her parents were toward Makoto, a creeping fear began to take hold in her heart. Her parents didn't reach the position of the wealthiest family by being blind or foolish. They had intelligence and insight. It was impossible they couldn't see she didn't like Makoto. And yet, they were desperately trying to push the two of them together, like characters following a pre-written script, locked into a single path with no choice. Willow, can't you see that my feelings for you are real? Don't forget, it was George who forced you into marriage. He humiliated you. I'm the only one who truly, wholeheartedly loves you. We're the perfect match. Makoto stepped forward and grabbed her shoulders, flames of obsession dancing in his eyes. Seeing that she didn't react, he gritted his teeth and continued. Willow, he's dead. Let him go. From now on, we can be happy together. Keep dreaming. Willow snapped, flinging the words at him, then turned and ordered the butler to throw him out. No matter how unwilling he was, Makoto didn't want to make a scene and could only leave, for now. But he didn't go far. He waited just outside the villa, hoping to catch her when she came out so he could talk to her again. An hour later, Willow emerged, her face still flushed with anger as she hurriedly drove away. Makoto quietly followed. He thought she was just going for a drive to clear her mind, but the car stopped at the villa she used to share with George. Ever since George's death, the place had become a memory she dared not touch. She didn't allow anyone to move a single thing inside, nor did she ever set foot there herself. Why would she suddenly come back now? Inside the villa, I had just found the property transfer agreement. As I expected, Willow hadn't signed it. Since I planned to leave everything behind, there was no reason to hold on to the house either. Just as I was about to make a call, the front door suddenly swung open. Willow rushed in, with Makoto tailing closely behind. The blinding sunlight poured in through the open door. I instinctively looked up, frowning, only to lock eyes with the two of them. George, you're alive. Makoto gasped in disbelief the moment he saw my face. His gaze scanned me from head to toe. My complexion looked healthy, my posture strong. Even my clothes were more refined than before. A surge of unspeakable rage began boiling inside him. So it was all a lie. The bankruptcy, the terminal illness, just part of George's elaborate scheme. He had pretended to be pitiful and dying, only to reappear at the perfect moment and steal Willow when she was most emotionally vulnerable. That way, he could have her completely. Makoto clenched his fists. The fury in his eyes was barely contained. Of course, I didn't miss the flash of murderous intent in his gaze. I frowned and asked coldly, "Why are you two here?" Willow quickly explained, "George, I didn't follow you on purpose. I just thought you might come here. I had something I needed to say." She turned and looked at Makoto, her annoyance clear as day. "Who told you to come? I already made myself very clear back at the Lu house. Can you stop following me around?" She didn't know why, but lately, just seeing Makoto gave her a headache. How had she never noticed before just how clingy and overbearing he was? No matter where she went, he always managed to show up. Once again rejected by her ice-cold tone, Makoto's face twisted into a wounded expression. Chapter 21. He just loved her, wanted to be with her forever. He used to follow closely behind Willow like this too, and she was never annoyed. But now, everything had changed. Just the sight of him was enough to ruin her mood. Makoto wanted to ask her if she had fallen in love with George, but when he met her cold, detached eyes, he swallowed the question silently. He turned and left the villa, but the more he thought about it, the more unwilling he felt. So he made a call to a friend. Inside the house, Willow and I stood in silence, locked in a long stare. Finally, we spoke at the same time. "George, what exactly did you come here for?" Catching her off guard, I continued, "Yes, I forced you back then, but you also forged a fake marriage certificate and lied to me for 3 years. We're even. Besides, I've started a new life now. I don't want to be involved in anything from the past. Stop dragging me back into it." My words were firm. Willow wasn't stupid. She could hear the message behind the message. I was drawing a hard line between us, and that included her. A bitter ache spread from her chest. The words she had prepared froze on the tip of her tongue. When she finally spoke, her voice trembled. George, it was all my fault. It was my pride. I kept feeling like we weren't equals, so I didn't dare face my feelings. As for the fake marriage certificate, I was momentarily lost, but after you died, I realized I'd already fallen for you. I just didn't know it yet. Can't you give me another chance? Her eyes were full of desperate hope, but I remained cold and unmoved. No, there was never supposed to be anything between us. You know that. Willow froze, her mind blank for a moment. It was like she hadn't grasped what I truly meant. I looked at the confused woman and explained coldly. Haven't you noticed something off lately? The George from your world is really dead. The one standing here now, the one who lived, is a George who doesn't belong in your world. Willow, the person you're meant to be with is Makoto. You and I were never supposed to be a possibility. Since the system was trying to correct the story, Willow, refusing to follow the plot, would also suffer the consequences. It would take time, but someone as sharp as her would eventually realize we came from different parallel worlds. The strangeness she had felt in her heart, I called it out in a single sentence. Thinking back on all the bizarre things she had experienced recently, the helplessness surged again. She had noticed, whenever she tried to get close to George, some invisible force pushed her away. But whenever Makoto appeared, everything went back to normal. But she didn't want to be a puppet controlled by some unseen hand. She didn't want to leave George. She didn't want to become a soulless machine. George, you should go back. Willow suddenly relented. When she looked up at me, her eyes were filled with determination. Return to your world. I'll take care of everything here. And when the day finally comes that I'm completely free, I hope you'll give me a chance to make things right. Her words stunned me. I was too shocked to speak for a long time. If I returned to my world, I could escape the story. But what about her? She was the female lead, the one destined to stay. She would be controlled by the narrative. She would fall for someone else against her will. She would completely forget about me. In the end, we would never cross paths again. We would become total strangers. The thought stabbed at my heart. I had believed I'd let go. But now that I was facing the inevitable ending, I couldn't stop the pain. The price I paid for defying the plot was death. But what would her price be? No one answered. In the empty villa, Willow's figure was already gone. Chapter 22. When Willow came out, Makoto had just hung up his call. As their eyes met, he didn't have time to conceal the malice in his gaze. She narrowed her eyes suspiciously, clearly trying to read him. Who were you just talking to? Just a friend. We're getting married, aren't we? Thought I'd let a few old friends know so the wedding can be more festive. Makoto awkwardly changed the subject, but what he said touched a nerve, exactly what she didn't want to hear. I already told you, I'm not marrying you. Stop spreading lies. Willow glared at him sharply, her tone brooking no argument. Fine, I got it. This time, he didn't push back. He simply nodded obediently. The drive was silent. Makoto opened his mouth several times to ask about me, but held back each time. Back when the explosion happened at the restaurant, the only body found was identified by police as George. DNA confirmed it. There was no doubt the person who died was him. But if George had truly died, then who was that man they just saw at the villa? And he didn't look sick at all. In fact, he looked healthier than ever, completely unlike the frail George from before. Even if the person who died wasn't him, there was no way a terminal illness could just miraculously disappear. In the end, he couldn't hold it in anymore. Willow, that guy, was that George? He's not. Willow replied instantly. As they waited at a red light, she turned to him, her voice laced with warning. They just look alike. That's all. George is dead. Makoto, don't drag other people into this. Makoto nodded repeatedly, grinning like nothing was wrong. Of course. Willow, don't worry, I've got no beef with him. Why would I stir up trouble with some stranger? But the moment she wasn't looking, that grin twisted into something darker. Look alike. Heh, like the world is just that full of coincidences. Not only did they look alike, they even had the same name. One dies in an explosion, and the other shows up a year later, in the very villa George used to share with Willow. Who the hell would believe they're not the same person? He didn't know what happened to that body back then, but George had disappeared for a while. Then, just when Willow couldn't move on from him, he returned to City A. If he left, why come back? Wouldn't it be better to just stay dead? Why insist on coming between them again? Whoever that man in the villa was, Makoto wasn't going to let him off with a face that's similar. Who knew when Willow might start to waver again? That was something Makoto would never allow. Meanwhile, I didn't linger in City A. Too many people here still had memories of me. For someone who was supposed to be dead to suddenly reappear, it would cause a huge stir. After some thought, I gave David a call. The moment he heard my voice, he swore loudly. Holy shit, George, you're alive. Yeah, it's a long story. I gave him a condensed version of what had happened, focusing on the key points. David, to his credit, was pretty adaptable. But after hearing everything, the first thing he cared about was, wait, Am I going to forget you one day? Can I still come see you in City C? Which world do I even belong to? Can I be assigned to your world? I don't want to lose my best bro. I couldn't answer a single one of his questions. All I could do was offer every reassuring word I could think of, and promise, on my life, that I would never forget him. Only then did David finally calm down. We chatted a bit more and agreed to meet at my place to discuss selling the house, but just as I stepped away from the villa, a group of armed thugs appeared behind me. Chapter 23. Meanwhile, David was so excited he changed outfits several times, getting ready to welcome his resurrected best friend. But 2 hours passed, and not only had he eaten lunch, George still hadn't shown up. David was usually a carefree guy, but this time, a strange sense of unease crept over him. Panicking, he called George. The line was busy for a moment, then disconnected. Something was definitely wrong. That wasn't like George at all. In an instant, David was convinced something had happened to him. He began pacing anxiously in place, remembering something George had said over the phone about the male and female leads. David immediately called Willow. Since she was the female lead of this world, maybe she could reach George. On the other end, Willow, who had been trying to figure out how to break free from the plot, immediately jumped in her car when she got the call. A wave of dread swept through her. George wasn't the type to stand people up. The last time she couldn't reach him, it ended with news of his death, and this time, she didn't dare finish that thought. She immediately called someone to track his whereabouts. David wasn't idle either. He pulled all the strings he had, trying every channel to locate George. But in this world, George was supposed to be dead. No matter how they searched, all they found was confirmation that he had died a year ago. It was like he had vanished from the face of the earth. No one could reach him. Just as David and Willow were at their wits' end, Maria suddenly pulled up in a car. Willow, Mr. David, I saw a group of guys kidnap George. They looked like they were gonna throw him into the sea and feed him to the fish. But, wasn't he supposed to be dead? Who did it? Where is he now? Willow had no time for explanations. Her voice was sharp with urgency. The three of them sped off toward an abandoned lighthouse. George was tied to a metal frame. A few thugs were trying to push him into the sea. What the hell are you doing? Stop. Willow's breath caught in her throat at the sight. The bodyguards behind her reacted instantly, rushing forward and subduing the thugs. George was rushed to the hospital. After a thorough examination, they were told his life wasn't in danger. He'd simply inhaled knockout gas and passed out. Only then did Willow let out a sigh of relief. But as she thought about the thugs, suspicion flashed in her eyes. George didn't have enemies in City A, and more importantly, he was supposed to be dead. Who would go after a dead man? And yet the moment he appeared, someone came for him. That could only mean this was premeditated. Someone with the means and the motive. In her mind, an image appeared, Makoto's strange smile earlier that day, and the phone call he had made. Suddenly, everything clicked. Makoto, just like her, had come from an ordinary family. He used to get into fights often and had connections with a lot of shady people. And ever since she married George, he had held a deep grudge. Now that George had returned, there was no way Makoto would sit back and do nothing. The more she thought about it, the more convinced she became. Just then, Maria sent her a message. Willow, those thugs confessed. Makoto ordered them to kill George. With that confirmation, Willow could no longer hold back her fury. She thought back to that cruel gleam in Makoto's eyes earlier. She had brushed it off, thinking he wouldn't do anything too extreme. But not only had he acted, he had gone straight for the kill. She had warned him in the car not to lay a finger on George. And what did he do? He ignored every word and committed a crime anyway. Makoto, you bastard, you deserve to die. After thinking for a moment, she sent a message to Maria, instructing her to have the thugs turned over to the police. As for the mastermind behind it all, that punishment, she would personally deliver. Chapter 24. I woke up around noon the next day, seeing David sitting by my bedside. I asked in a raspy voice, how long was I out? Oh my God, George, you're finally awake. David was startled by my voice and immediately leaned in to check me over, top to bottom, fussing nonstop. You scared the hell out of me. 1 minute we're talking on the phone, and the next, you vanish. If it weren't for Willow and Miss Shu helping out, you'd be fish food by now. You weren't out long, maybe a dozen hours or so. Good thing you're okay. My poor heart couldn't take it. I was just getting over the trauma of your death, and right when I'm excited about seeing you again, bam, you're in the hospital. George, seriously, maybe you should just go back to that other world you mentioned. Sounds safer over there. How do you get back anyway? Is there some kind of portal or barrier? The more David talked, the wilder his imagination got. I quickly cut him off. This isn't a movie. Don't get carried away with the portal stuff. It's not that dramatic. I just need to get back to City C. Truthfully, I had no idea how the rules of parallel worlds worked. All I knew was, I wasn't supposed to be around Willow. And as for the Willow who hadn't shown up at the hospital, she was currently standing in the Liu family's basement. The cramped, suffocating space reeked with mold and rot. The damp air was heavy and foul. In the darkness, Makoto was curled up in a corner, hands bound. His eyes were vacant, his body covered in fresh and old whip marks, bleeding from countless wounds. The floor beneath him was soaked in blood. His pale face was twisted in terror. After another harsh strike from the whip, Makoto collapsed to the ground, dragging himself toward Willow with great effort. "Willow, please, let me go. I swear I'll never do it again." The corners of her lips curled into a cruel smile. Her red lips parted. "Makoto, you dared to hurt George. I'll make you wish you were dead." At her signal, the bodyguards continued lashing him. As she turned to leave, his screams echoed behind her. Willow paid them no mind. She returned to her room, calmly changed into fresh clothes, and prepared to head to the hospital. But the moment she stepped out, Makoto, somehow having escaped, lunged and wrapped his hands around her neck. His eyes were bloodshot. His filthy hands tightened around her throat, and his face twisted with unrestrained hatred. "Willow, what gives you the right to treat me like this? We've known each other for years. I was always the most special person to you. Even after you married George, I knew you still had me in your heart. Hell, even he couldn't replace me. But even with that, I went mad with jealousy. I waited for you all these years. I stayed by your side. Finally, fate smiled on me. Wang's family went bankrupt. George was terminally ill, and then he conveniently died in a fire. With him gone, I thought I could finally have you. But no, you changed. Only after he died did you realize you loved him. And what about me? What the hell was I to you? I waited all this time, just to be with you. What did I do wrong? If he was already dead, why did he come back? I want him dead. Anyone who stands in my way deserves to die." As he spoke, he suddenly started laughing until tears poured down his face, his whole body descending into madness. "Willow, you can't not love me. You're only allowed to love me. If I've fallen this far, and you still want to just walk away and go see him, then I won't allow it. If I die, you're coming with me." His hatred had nowhere to go. Makoto's eyes flared with a dangerous light. Clutching Willow tightly, he threw himself off the second floor, dragging her down with him. Chapter 25. The world spun wildly. A strange buzzing exploded in her ears, followed by the maid's screams and the frantic footsteps of bodyguards. It felt like a second, or an eternity. Her body slammed hard against the ground. Bones cracked, organs ruptured, but the searing pain she expected didn't come. Instead, her whole body felt weightless, like she was rising. Was she dying? Her consciousness hadn't fully faded when a cold mechanical voice suddenly echoed in her mind. "Detected. Male lead attempting to kill female lead. Narrative collapse imminent. Commencing full system purge. Full purge initiated. The male lead trying to kill the female lead." Was that referring to Makoto and her? And what did purge even mean? Before she could process the thought, her vision went stark white. The world around her blurred, the sky and earth melting into a single void. She was the only living being left. Suddenly, the white boundary pulsed with piercing red light, and the mechanical voice returned, now blaring from every direction. "Irreparable narrative failure detected. Reverting to original configuration. Estimated reset completion in 3 minutes." As the emotionless voice faded, Willow felt a dull pain in her head. Then, her thoughts started to blur. Memories rewound through her mind like a broken reel. She watched in horror as her memories began to fade. Worse, her memories of George were disappearing first. Helplessness spread like wildfire. She wanted to fight it, but now she was only a drifting shadow, weightless and formless. The mechanical voice continued, erasing all data related to outsider villain George, erasing male lead's corrupted emotional data, obsessive resentment toward female lead, erasing female lead's excessive emotional attachment to villain. Hearing this, Willow suddenly understood. This was the system George had spoken of. She was the female lead of this world. Makoto was the male lead. They were fated to fall in love, and George was nothing more than an anomaly. But Willow refused to let her life be dictated by a machine. She shouted furiously at the flashing red light, "Don't you dare control my life. As long as I'm alive, you'll never have your way." The system paused at her scream. Then, in its same unfeeling tone, it replied, "Loving and uniting with the male lead is your mission. This ensures narrative stability." Willow laughed bitterly, her voice trembling with rage. To hell with that. If she had still doubted George's words before, she now believed every single one of them. If this world could only function when the male and female leads loved each other, yet she and Makoto loathed each other to the point of murder, then of course the story couldn't continue, and of course the system had to appear to reset everything. Suddenly, she remembered how George had been forced to return to his original world. The system had given him cancer, yet also a way out. That meant it didn't want to kill people, it only wanted to maintain order. If that was true, then maybe she could escape her role too. Clinging to that hope, she spoke quickly, "System, let me go. Pick another female lead. There's definitely someone better suited than me." The red light stayed still, unmoved. Willow panicked. Her chest heaved, and her voice grew more desperate. I love George. I want to be with him. Even if you erase my memories now, my heart will still fall in love with him again. No matter how far apart we are. Someday, I'll remember who I truly love, and when that happens, the world will still fall apart. You'll have to reset it again, and maybe again, and again. How many times do you think you'll have to keep doing this? Won't you get tired? Chapter 26. In truth, Willow didn't know if the machine could get tired. She was just trying to buy herself a chance. Fortunately, the system seemed to listen. The flashing red light stopped, and after a pause, the voice returned. Why are you refusing to be the female lead? I've given you a top-tier life and infinite wealth. In the world I created, you're safe, surrounded by flowers and applause. You are the center of it all. Its tone was no longer icy. There was confusion in it now. It couldn't understand why this human in front of it would resist. It had already given her the best of everything. An exceptional appearance, a wealthy family, noble status, endless fortune, and the male lead's genuine love. But Willow rejected all of it. She shook her head firmly, her eyes burning with resolve. I don't want to be the female lead. I don't want a life controlled by someone else. I want to be with the one I love, and live a life that's mine. Not one written into a script. Are you sure? If you give up your role as the female lead, everything you have now will vanish. The system didn't understand human emotion, but now, just like the villain last time, this human was making the same choice, and that baffled it. Weren't humans supposed to prioritize self-interest? Why didn't they want the perfect script it had designed? Willow nodded toward the system. I'm sure, but George exists in a parallel world opposite yours. You two were never meant to cross paths. I control this world and assign every character their path. He also has his own script to follow. 3 years from now, he'll meet his own female lead. Even knowing this, you still want to give up your role. The system's words hit Willow like lightning. George would have his own female lead. If she forced this change, wouldn't that make her no better than George once was? When he forced her into marriage, wouldn't she become the villain in someone else's love story? Suddenly, she felt the weight of cause and effect, of fate looping back on itself. Willow froze. She didn't know what to choose. The system, seeing her hesitation, began flashing again, triumphantly. As expected, when humans heard about imperfect endings, they always backed down. This would be no different, but the system's confidence shattered in the next instant. Willow had only paused briefly. Then, her gaze sharpened, more resolute than ever. I still want to give up being the female lead, even if he ends up with someone else. I won't regret it. If this was fate, one she couldn't fight, she would still accept it. As long as she could remember that she once loved George, it would be enough. The system was stunned. It didn't respond for a long time. Finally, it said, everything you now possess is because of your protagonist aura. If you give it up, I won't protect you anymore. From now on, you'll be on your own. It tried again to persuade her, but Willow didn't hesitate. She nodded without a second thought. Fine, I willingly give up everything I've received. You'll die. The system suddenly seemed reluctant to lose such a unique female lead, but Willow's resolve was absolute. Even if it meant death, she was willing. The system sighed, helpless. Then, the red light faded away, leaving behind one final sentence. Very well, I will assign a new soul to take your place. As for you, it disappeared too quickly. Willow didn't catch the last part, and then, her entire world went black. Chapter 27. My injuries weren't serious. I was cleared to leave the hospital the same day I regained consciousness, but as I was preparing to leave, Willow still hadn't shown up. A vague sense of unease stirred in my chest. Still, I had no reason to interfere in her life anymore. So, after saying goodbye to David, I got in the car and left, but I hadn't driven far before the car abruptly turned back around. I'd received a message from Maria. Willow had fallen from a height and was now in critical condition in the ICU. My heart dropped. I spun the car around and raced back to the hospital. In the ICU, Willow's frail figure lay on the hospital bed. Her chest rose and fell weakly, the ventilator letting out sharp beeping noises, like it was warning me she could die at any moment. Maria told me Makoto had jumped from the upper floor while holding Willow. He died on impact, and just before Willow lost consciousness, she had whispered my name. Hearing that, I was overwhelmed by a surge of guilt. It was all my fault. If I had never walked into that restaurant, if I had never fallen in love with her at first sight, if I hadn't forced my way into her world, she would have lived a much happier life, loved by the right man, surrounded by friends. But because of one selfish choice, everything had changed. My chest tightened painfully again. Looking at her through the glass, I murmured, Willow. I'm sorry. As the words left my mouth, the monitor beside her exploded into a piercing alarm. On the screen, 3 flat lines. Inside, doctors scrambled to save her. Minutes later, the attending physician quietly wrote down Willow's time of death. I watched her body get covered with a white sheet, I should have felt grief, but strangely, I couldn't shed a single tear. 3 days later, the Liu family adopted a bright, adorable little girl from an orphanage. They held an elaborate ceremony to welcome her as their own. It made headlines. Everyone of status in City A attended. When David told me about it, I was stunned, shaken. After a long pause, I shakily typed out a message. David, do you remember Willow, the daughter the Liu family reunited with last year? His reply came fast. George, what's going on? You've asked that same question dozens of times these past few days. The Liu couple can't have children. They've never had a daughter. Anne. Willow. Who's Willow? You've never mentioned her before. I put down my phone, mind blank. Willow was dead, but the day after her death, her body disappeared. Every trace of her existence was gone. No one remembered she had ever lived. Even her closest friend, Maria. When I said her name, she only shook her head in confusion. I could guess what had happened. The system had repaired the narrative, but I hadn't expected it to do so by erasing both the male and female leads. Maybe Willow had become too unpredictable, and the system decided to eliminate her entirely. I opened my eyes and stared at the leaves swaying outside the window, thoughts drifting far away. Where do people go after being erased by the system? Will she ever appear again? I sat silently, staring out the window. By the 3rd year after Willow's disappearance, the world continued as if nothing had happened. Life returned to peace. Sometimes I'd meet up with David in City A. He still remembered me, but everything related to Willow was completely gone. Maria's family worked with David's, so I saw her from time to time too. Every now and then, when she heard the name Willow, she'd pause, like something stirred in the back of her mind. But when asked directly if she knew her, she would only shake her head. 3 years, I stopped holding on. One day, on the way home, the driver suddenly shouted, "Mr. Wang, someone's blocking the road." I leaned out the window and saw a girl in a white dress, arms spread wide, standing in front of the car. A playful smile lit up her delicate face. The driver moved to chase her off, but before he could, I flew out of the car like a gust of wind. Standing before her, staring at that familiar face, my chest heaved uncontrollably. I asked the question that had been buried in my heart for 3 years. Willow, is it really you? Her smile widened, and she ran straight into my arms. George, I made a deal with the system. I gave up my role as female lead and worked for it for 3 years, in exchange for the chance to become the female lead in your world. You once barged into my story and forcefully changed the plot. Now, I've done the same. But this time, I'm doing it openly and honestly. George, will you take responsibility for me? Hearing her say that, everything finally made sense. The system really had gone soft. It let me go once, sent me and my family safely back to our original world. It gave us peace, comfort, and now, it had given Willow a choice too. No wonder no one in City A remembered her. She had been reborn, with a new identity. Suddenly, I smiled. I wrapped her tightly in my arms and replied, my voice light and filled with joy, "Of course I will.